Welcome everyone. Today we have an updated version of an amazing Paladin build. Now as you can see behind me, our Paladin friend is currently going through over 2200 corruption, and the animation also skill casting is pretty interesting, right? So yes guys, today we'll be learning from Iva Makova again, and she or he was the content creator that we learned last time with UNKILLABLE Paladin build, and big thank you for them for sharing the build. So before we dive into the build, I just want to briefly summarize what has changed and what is the core concept of the build. So over here you can see we'll be self-igniting and then gaining more damage as we ignite ourselves with more spell damage. Iva has stated that they could gain up to 10 to 11 stacks with higher casting speed, together with the ability to gain even more warding while self-ignited with those rings, and even more fire damage using the helmet, the boots, and also 100% more armor using the relic. He will be doing a lot of damage while retaining lots of stats and also resistance, together with casting speed and also critical chances. And finally, having the experimental Affix crafted on those gloves means that he will be converting current HP into warding per second as well. And that's what we're going to see in this demonstration. So jumping over to the video, you can see this is over 2200 corruption, and our Paladin friend has really done a very good job in updating and also constantly making creative build. Now this particular build will be a fire-based Paladin, so the damage you are dealing will be fire-based. One of the things you want to notice is how much warding he's gaining, and together with the ability to constantly sustain himself. And this Paladin is going to be self-igniting. As he self-ignite, he will gain even more damage, together with the ability to constantly be healing himself and also gaining mobility and also invulnerability. This build is extremely powerful in terms of AoE and also in terms of map clearing. And you can see guys, this is pretty much an immortal Paladin, but with a new casting animation using the healing hand, which casts your healing bolts. And yes, this build has some pretty decent range compared to the previous build, also mobility, together with tons of survivability and also AoE damage. Now as we skip a little forward, you can see the Paladin at work against hordes of enemies. Now the build does have one drawback, and I'm sure you guys might have seen the previous Paladin build. It is extremely tanky, it deals tons of AoE damage, but in terms of single target damage, it will fall short a little bit. So jumping over to one of the story bosses with over 2200 corruption. Now Iva over here does demonstrate to us that the build is incredibly survivable, but if you look closely, you can see that compared to most of the high damage build, the Paladin build will lack some damage in terms of single target. Well, to compensate this, you will have tons of warding gain, and if you're patient enough, after 2 to 3 minutes, the boss will die. And you do have a kill threshold under 15%, I believe, so this way you're ideally taking down the boss to 85% and then one-shotting it. It will take a little longer, because this build is built for more tanking survivability, which can be great if you can get some items for your hardcore combos. And as you can see over here, he will be one-shotting the boss after the kill threshold by using launch over here. So the build does have some potential against single target, but this is the biggest disclaimer. The build does fall short in terms of single target damage. But in comparison, it is extremely fun to watch and also very powerful in terms of mapping and also clearing out tons of monsters. Now before we jump over to our builder's guide, a very big thank you for Iva Makova for constantly updating and also making new build for the Paladins. A lot of our viewers have been requesting to learn the new Paladin build, and this is the reason I want to make this video. But at the same time, I don't want to take away the credits and also the hard work for Iva Makova over here. He or she has made tons of variation of the Paladin build, and I really do recommend following them to learn and also see the latest version of the Endgame Paladin build. If we come over to the comments over here, you can see Iva is replying to a lot of questions, lots of comments. And if you look into the descriptions, they will have tons of additional information together with a guide Excel and also a loot filter available for you guys. Now if you look into the build behind me, Iva has provided us with multiple setups with their current build and together with ideal setup, and also with a leveling build. So if you guys want to pick up this particular Paladin, this is a really good transitional process to start the Paladin off and then to go into the stronger build, and then there is an ideal final build. We'll be studying on the final setup, but you guys should not be too worried if you don't get all of those items, because if you look at Iva's current setup, it is not min and max as well, and this is already doing over 2200 corruption. So coming over to the updated version of the Paladin build. So what has kept the same is some of the abilities that will be following from the previous Paladin build. You will still be gaining invulnerability through lunge. This is your mobility skill together with a 15% kill threshold, which is very powerful against single target. Your biggest source of damage spell is now Healing Hands, which is converted into Divine Bolts. Those will be scaling with healing effectiveness and also restoring health and also dealing tons of AoE damage. Together with the ability of the Holy Aura, which gives you tons of resistance, and also fire penetration, increased fire damage, and also attack speed and also casting speed. You'll be doing tons of more damage in terms of fire with your Divine Bolt. Now, Javelin was still one of the skills of choice, which allows us to summon a battle stand, and this will be auto-casting Smite with more frequency and also dealing more damage. Together with the ability to summon sigils as kill monsters, this will allow the Paladin to have even more damage together with higher enduring threshold. Now in terms of the passives, you can see that in the Paladin tree, Divine Bolt is going to be one of the major focus. Together with the ability to deal even more fire damage and also additional critical chance for your spells and also critical damage, this build will focus on healing effectiveness, attunement, intelligence together with cold resistance for higher ward retention. Now coming over to the items of choice. We'll be using the Mad Alchemist Wand, and this ideally will give us additional casting speed that also scales with intelligence. Together with additional fire damage and also fire penetration, this will also deal even more damage as we apply more debuffs to the enemies. Now one of the reasons we're stacking casting speed is because of this belt. This belt will allow us to self-ignite, and while self-igniting, we'll be having additional spell damage up to 240 if you can get 40 stacks. But as you're going to see in Iva's video, they have about 10 to 15 stacks at maximum depending on your casting speed, and this will provide up to 60 or even 90 increased spell damage. Now Calamity is the helmet of choice because its availability for higher legendary potential, and this item should be relatively cheap in terms of not many people are using this one, and you will be wanting to go with at least plus 3 or 4 level of Healing Hand, which will be your major source of damage. Together with main stats of attunement and also cold resistance. Now one of the centerpiece of the build is having this particular set of gloves, and this is crafted with the experimental Affix converting missing health towards warding, and this is very important. Now Iva has provided a leveling setup that also uses a different gloves but also use this experimental Affix. So keep in mind guys, if you want to be gaining tons of warding with your Paladin, this particular experimental Affix is essential. If you cannot find those items to be crafted on, you can simply go with the experimental item using those affixes, and this is essential for the Paladin to be gaining more warding. Now on the topic of warding, you can see those rings are now providing the Paladin with additional warding as you self-ignite and also ignite enemies. Together with crafting healing effectiveness and also the implicit to deal even more fire damage, those rings combined with this belt will be ideal for the setup to gain even more warding. Now if we come over to the relic, you can see this relic also provides you ways of igniting enemies, dealing more damage to ignite enemies, and also gaining 100% increased armor while ignited. So this is one of the ways the Paladin can become extremely tanky while not holding a shield. Yes, compared to the previous Paladin, we're not holding a shield as a Paladin for this setup. So coming over to the offhand. The offhand is going to use the Scales Adra, and this particular relic has tons of great stats in terms of implicit and also tons of stats we wanted. Now Iva did state in the Excel that this particular offhand should not be using the fire infusion one. So if you look closely, he's using the cold and also the lightning infusion ones. And this is not using the fire infusion just in case you get the 80% less fire damage, and that is not good for the build. Now finally for the boots. You'll be getting additional movement speed, additional fire penetration, additional fire damage, and also chance to leave a fire trail. So this boots is ideally going to boost your damage even further throughout increased fire damage. As for the chest and also for the amulets, we'll be crafting into healing effectiveness and also more attunement, together with even more fire damage, cold resistance, which increase our ward retention, and also additional ways to shred armor. It's very important, guys, to have at least one way to shred armor. Usually this can be crafted on the weapon or on the gloves. But because those are more rare, you could be crafting this one on the amulet, which allows you to deal more damage to the single target. Now briefly going through the idols and also blessings. We'll be using the Throne of Ambition, and this will allow us to deal even more fire damage, stacking with even more armor. Together with the ability to increase healing effectiveness while applying armor shred on fire hit. And also some additional resistance for the things we're missing, together with even more healing resistance. In terms of the blessings, we'll be going with increased critical strike chance, increasing all resistance, increasing ways to apply fire resistance shredding, cold resistance, and also finally increased stun chance. I'm not 100% sure about the increased stun chance. I will be thinking of going with increased ward per second, but our friend has picked this one for his ideal setup. Now coming over to the demonstration of the skill rotations. Right away you can see our Paladin will be casting his sigils and also casting a few spells, so he can start with tons of warding before engaging enemies. And right after that, you can cast your healing hand and everything will pretty much melt in front of you while gaining tons of warding. Your increased damage spells will be coming from using your javelin, which will allow you to summon a battle standard, together with your mobility skill to launch towards enemies. Most of the fights in terms of the echo mapping should be pretty simple. You'll be spamming your healing hand and this will deal tons of damage. Together with abilities to summon additional sigils as you kill enemies, this is a pretty simple skill rotation for you to go through the mappings and also take down tons of enemies. Now the Paladin build is extremely tanky. As long as we have the right Affix crafted on the gloves, and also as we cast even more fire spells, we'll be self-igniting and also dealing even more damage. So the ideal case for the Paladin is to be standing still and also casting tons of fire spells, and this in return will give us tons of more warding and also even more spell damage coming from the belt. Now coming over to the boss fight for the Paladin. As mentioned earlier, guys, this build does fall short in terms of single target damage. And as you can see, you're pretty much doing the same rotations, summoning your javelin with battling banners and then spamming your spells while keeping yourself with 4 sigils. The build is gonna require some patience against the boss, and over the time you will take down the boss. One of the biggest highlights is as the boss gets to lower threshold HP, close to 15%, you want to make the space, take the launch, and then one-shotting the boss to save you some time as you take down the boss under 15%. Now hopefully you guys enjoyed this updated version of the Paladin build for Iva. And a big thank you for them for sharing this updated version of the build. And in order to direct you guys to their video, I will leave some of the links towards the builder's guide for the Paladin. But they also have additional Excel notes on which of the stats you want to be building and which of the stats you want to be looking for, together with additional notes of how to best use of the offhand and also the weapon choices and also additional alternatives. And also a loot filter is also provided. So I strongly recommend coming over to the original guide and then follow those links to build your Paladin and also to go through over 2000 corruption using this new setup. Now if you guys find my videos and also guides helpful and also want to support my passion in making more guides and also more videos for the last Epoch and also more games to come like Path of Exile, please consider joining me on Patreon, and also here I have created my Ko-Fi page. You can also support me directly through donations, but supporting me continuously with one of those memberships will mean a lot for my future updated videos and to become financially sustainable so I can be continuing making videos for you guys and doing what I love the most, and that is to share and also teach our communities as I dive into different games and making more guides for you guys. And as you guys gonna see in the future, I'll have different ranks and also perk advantages and also special events and also special features for members like account reviews, perfecting the build for you guys, and also co-op time play, and also even special future videos for you guys on your special build for different members.